All right, we're going to have kind of a spring day today. We are here to see, to watch the Oedipus Curios, sometimes called Oedipus Rex. Remember, this is something you look at, you view, you don't just read. It's by Socrates. About 425 BC, 425 years before Christ was born, 2,500 years before today. There are about 15,000 of us sitting in a semicircle, sitting in bleachers, on wood bleachers, not these nice comfortable chairs that swing out and back and listen. You're sitting on wood bleachers outside the Theater of Dionysus, because this is a Dionysus festival. It's a March day. Let's say it's a little chilly. It's maybe 50 degrees. That's chilly in Greece. 50, 60 degrees. And we're going to see it. It's a little after dawn. The Greeks got up at dawn and they went to bed when it got dark. And so it's dawn, 6 o'clock in the morning, maybe like that. All right. Everybody seated there. Wooden bleachers, got that, keep that in mind. You got cushions, we know they use cushions. You got your peanuts, a bottle of wine, and we're going to settle down to watch this play. It's Friday, right? It's the third day of the festival. And we will be seeing today 3 tragedies by Socrates this morning. And then a comedy by another poet. So today, get real comfortable, we're going to be here 7, 8, 9 hours watching Greek drama. 3 tragedies and a comedy. We saw 3 tragedies by Aeschylus and a comedy. So we spent 9 hours here on Wednesday. Thursday, yesterday, we saw 3 tragedies by Euripides and a comedy. 9 hours. So we essentially will have 27 hours of Greek drama over these 3 days, sitting on these wooden bleachers outside Athens. So we will see altogether that many. We'll see 9 tragedies at this festival. Keep in mind there's another festival later in the year where we'll probably see another half dozen or so. So we see probably 15 to 20 tragedies a year. Every one of them is new. None of them is a reproduction, revival of an old one. Each one is written just for this occasion. And that means if we've been going to the theater for 10 years, we've seen like 100 Greek tragedies over time. We know that genre very well. We are also, and this is really important, we are, the 15,000 of us, I hate to tell you, it's mostly men, okay? It's mostly men, not exclusively probably, but mostly men. It's probably the entire citizenry of our country. It's all the male adult citizens of our country. So what we are being presented will have been presented by and seen pretty much by everybody who's a voting member of our country. And just imagine if every American voter would go and see the same play or the same anything, and we all had that in common. This is a way that the poets actually instruct their fellow citizens of our kind of cultural knowledge. We will remember that Oedipus was a king of Thebes. That's a separate country. We're in Athens. Thebes is up there. Thebes always is a little worrisome to the Athenians. Thebes, when the Persians came through in the Great Invasion when the Persians invaded Greece in 480, the Thebans went over to the Persians. And that's bad, because we fought against the Persians and defeated them and so forth. And so it goes. If there's anything bad going on in Greece, it tends to be those Thebans up there, about 50 miles away. And they do a lot of bad and weird things. This whole Oedipus story is part. And this is something we know as a tragic convention, but not as a real life fact. Okay? There are so many Greek tragedies. They are so common. Actually, of course, we're actually talking about Athenian tragedy, right? There's no such thing as a Greek tragedy. All the tragedies we have were written at Athens. And they were all written for Athenians. They were all written for Athenians. So we're really talking about Athenian tragedy every time we say Greek tragedy, but that's okay. The Athenians were generous. We'll give that to all the Greeks. That genre had some conventions that we would just expect to happen when we were going to a play. Part of it's that unusual language, kind of stilted language that we hear. Part of it is the use of the chorus and all that. That's just what you expect when you hear or read or see a Greek tragedy. There are two conventions of Greek tragedy that we would know before we started reading this play that would have a huge effect on how we read the play. One is that in tragedy, not in everyday life necessarily, but in tragedy, every oracle comes true. Every oracle comes true. And we know when we hear an oracle that it's going to come true. The second thing is, in a Greek tragedy, every prophet tells the truth. That's a convention of Greek tragedy. So, we know, and I always tell my students, if you find yourself in a Greek tragedy, you are a character in a Greek tragedy, listen to the prophet. The prophet is telling the truth. Why? Because that's the convention. And that tells, and we're saying, no, don't do that, don't do that. And we hear the oracle that he will kill his father. Well, we know he killed his father. We know the oracle comes true. And yet we hear him trying to avoid fulfilling the oracle. We see him questioning all these various things. All the way through, we, the audience, know we see people making mistakes right and left. And we're superior to them, but it also brings out a very kind of tough emotion in us. It's a very complicated emotion. If you see somebody making a mistake that could cause them their life, walking out into the street, it's a very complex. Oedipus has said it was Apollo who did this. The second half of that line, that's the first half. The second half of that line is, but, great big but, I struck with my own hand my eyes. I myself struck my eyes. The blinding of Oedipus is his own action of free will. That's not even in the myth before Sophocles, we don't think. It's not necessary. It's not fated. It's not in the oracle. It's what he chose to do. It's how he wished to deal with this awful situation. He wished to suffer, and he didn't want to have to ever look again at those whom he had harmed. He didn't want to look at those again whom he had loved, but he was going to persevere through his suffering internally. He wanted even to close off his eyes. He would just live in his mind with his suffering. And I think in doing so, Oedipus actually chose a heroic action, much more heroic in death. And for that, he is a hero, a Sophoclean kind of hero.